Got a wife, got a family. Earn my living with my hand. The rolling steel mill, downtown Birmingham.
Okay, this is a simulation because Gus and I spoke for 17 minutes today. Luxurious minutes, because I love talking to the guy about movies. And then when I downloaded it from Spreaker.com, my best friends, it did not work. There was Randy Newman to start, as you just heard, and then there was silence, which I don't understand because I definitely hit record. I knew we were recording. It actually clocked it at 17 minutes and such, and for some reason nothing was available after I downloaded it. So I have no idea what happened. So in conclusion, I was totally depressed about it. So after I went out to dinner tonight, I decided to come home and regurgitate, like a mother bird does to the baby birds, what we talked about. And I'm going to publish this if, in fact, I can ever find what we recorded, which was a shame. But let me set the scene for you. We were at a loft hotel in the atrium space, which is this really kind of cool outdoor space. Mind you, it's humid and balmy, but Gus was willing to sit out there with me. And we chatted about Memorial Day films, and he had watched and loved Last Flag Flying, which I had not seen, with Steve Carell, Lawrence Fishburne, and the lovely Bryan Cranston, and he absolutely loved it. And he told me that it went with a comedic sort of tone about a very serious topic. And I explained that I didn't go see the movie because I was worried it was going to be maudlin, depressing. I couldn't do it. And we sort of talked about how sometimes people get scared away from movies because they don't want to feel, they don't want to feel that deeply. They just want to be entertained. But yet when you're allowed to go access those things, it really does do beneficial things for you because you let those emotions out that you've been stuffing, hiding, avoiding. So I highly recommend it. Even though I haven't seen the film, I'm definitely going to watch it. A film that I did watch for Gus was called The Majestic from 2001, and he had highly recommended it because it's an homage to movies and movie theaters. And so we started talking about films like that. And he couldn't remember a lot of it because, again, it was almost 20 years ago, but he did remember loving it and just remembering the marquee and just that old classic style movie theater. So we got into a discussion about how new movie theaters are going more recliners, privacy, where it's not as much of a shared experience as the old theaters were. And we sort of bemoaned that fact that, that's a shame. And I actually had a feeling when I was watching The Majestic during Martin Landau's very poignant speech about how they had to refurbish this movie theater, that perhaps in another 20 years, society will come around where people don't want to hole up in their houses and watch Netflix all the time. They'll want to go to a communal place and watch a movie. So that was a positive thing. We actually started talking about other movies that take a serious topic and make a light topic out of it. And when I say light, I don't mean make fun of it per se, but they just are joyful movies like Little Miss Sunshine. And Gus agreed that that's probably one of his favorite movies in the last 15 years. And it is a great movie. Again, Steve Carell, Tony Collette, Paul Dano, and Alan Arkin. So great cast in that film. So we talked about that. He talked about Greg Kinnear also, who's in that movie, and how we got to interview him and how he's such a nice guy. So that was fun. Back to The Majestic. He talked about the director of that film being the same writer and director of Shawshank Redemption, and that he was a big Frank Capra fan, and so he probably loved movie theaters and loves movie theaters. He's still living, and that's probably why he made The Majestic. And it was made in 2001, December, which was the horrific year of 9/11. And that's why I think the movie probably succeeded, because it was so sweet. It's what everyone needed. They wanted to feel good about America. They wanted to feel good about our country, that we could regain our wholesomeness after such a tragic event. And that's what the Majestic was about, only set in the 50s, after World War II, after the people came home. A lot of people had died, obviously, and yet there was healing and love still here in our country, and that was important. We talked about how important veterans are, and Gus obviously has a huge heart. He had a great guest on his show last night, At the Movies with Gus Molassis, on Facebook, whose first name is Russ, and he told some very poignant stories about his experiences, and funny stories too, and what a nice, resilient man he is. What else did we talk about? Oh, we talked about movies that we were looking forward to. We talked about Burns Court, and how Gus is going to do a talk back on June 3rd about a Shakespeare movie starring Kenneth Branagh, and that Shakespeare as a man has not been the subject of movies very much. And we talked about Shakespeare in Love and how that was sort of not satisfying to us, even though it won the Academy Award. And so we're looking forward to that movie about Shakespeare with Kenneth Branagh, who's like basically a Shakespeare expert. We talked about Biggest Little Farm, which is a documentary coming up at Burns Court, and how that we are both sort of suspect to, as is it worth the hype? And I said perhaps farmers would know more than we would as lay people whether that movie is realistic or not. I mean, the man who made the movie is a National Geographic photographer, so obviously he knows how to spin a good story with photographs and film. But is it true? Is it the movie? Gus also worried, does it have a political message, and is that sort of going to hit us over the head with a hammer, which he doesn't need? And he compared it to Vice, which had a big hammer. We had a great talk, so we sort of rounded our bases with veterans, our love for veterans, farms, and then I brought it back to This Land Is Our Land, and we ended the podcast. I love talking to Gus. I am so fortunate to having met him, because in Rochester, even though I had the Eastman House, I didn't really have a big film community to which discuss things about. Here, I'm still forming that community, but Gus is definitely the number one person, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to do things with him like this podcast. So, this is a prayer that the original with Gus's voice, which you'd much prefer hearing than me babbling on for minutes upon minutes, is going to actually appear when I look it up later. But I have no idea what I did wrong, because I think I did everything right. So, God bless technology, and let's hope the other one's successful. If that's not, you're stuck with me for this week, and I promise next week we are going to get this rolling and do it right. So, shout out to the veterans, because that's how we ended, and Gus wanted you to remember those people for sacrificing their lives for our country, and I totally ditto that sentiment. Bye.